In an earlier Gospel Bite video, I mentioned that a natural question when you see a book titled A Praying Church is to ask, how can we pray better? And I mentioned that the primary focus at the beginning of the book is just simply to ask the question, not how can we pray better together, but why should we pray together in the first place? And so we talked briefly about being the people of God and being a house of prayer. We talked briefly about the powertrain. But I do want to make sure that we understand that the book itself does answer some of the questions of how to pray better. There's a great chapter, chapter 22, about how to use the prayer menu. That's simply a tool in which helps guide us into different aspects of windows to enter into prayer. For instance, one of the windows is through our feelings. How am I feeling about the situation? And to be able to pray those things. Obviously, one of the windows is our desires, or what do we want? Another window might be watching and waiting and asking, what is God doing? And another might even be praising God for who He is. And so you can see even in the life of Jesus, in His prayers in John chapter 12, that He follows that pattern and starts by saying He's feeling anxious as He anticipates the cross, and He's praying this, and yet not His will, but God's will be done. Another great chapter is called Band of Brothers, chapter 24, and it dives into how to use prayer in the discipleship of people, especially in this particular case for those struggling with sexual temptation. The chapter after that is called Turbocharging Our Prayers and focuses in on the spiritual discipline of fasting in combination with prayer. And so there are many different chapters really addressing how can we pray better. But also, I think the question of just how does prayer happen is one that's answered by the book. And so for those of you who are familiar with the ministry of See Jesus, you might be familiar with the J-curve. The J-curve is simply the shape of the gospel that moves from life down to death up to resurrection. That was the shape of Jesus' literal story, from life to death to His resurrection. And Philippians 3 says, if we follow in His footsteps, our lives too, we will share in the fellowship of His sufferings and also the power of His resurrection. Now, what does that have to do with prayer? The J-curve is the shape of praying before, during, and after prayer. What do I mean by that? When we experience a dying, a form of suffering, a form of hardship, it's our weakness that is the potential gateway into praying, because we feel the need to call upon the one who's in charge. As we pray together with other people, it is a form of dying. It takes time. It takes sacrifice. There's an awkwardness when we're praying with other people and learning to pray together. And the answer to prayer is also often involves quite a bit of dying before resurrection happens. And so having a shape of how prayer happens before, during, and after doesn't necessarily give us direct, immediate answers to our prayers, but it gives us a sense of gospel wisdom to be able to have a sense of what God might be doing as He leads us into prayer, as we actually pray together, and then as we look for the answers that He brings. And so my hope is that this book would be of great encouragement, of equipping to you and your church community in a way that would not only access the powertrain, but that you might see and experience the power of God's resurrection in your life, in your church, and in your community.